From Washington, D.C. to the heart of America, welcome to Mark Alford's America. I'm freshman Congressman from Missouri, Mark Alford, and I believe in America. I believe in you, and most importantly, I believe that our greatest days are ahead. You know, each week we take you behind the scenes to share the stories, the news, the legislation, and to meet the great people who are helping shape our fantastic nation. One of those lawmakers is Chairman Mike Rogers, representing Alabama's 3rd Congressional District. Chairman Rogers is a sixth-generation East Alabamian. Since he was first elected in 2002, he's been working hard for the 3rd Congressional District. Right now, he serves as the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, which I'm honored to be on. Previously served as the ranking member of the Committee on Homeland Security in the 116th Congress. After graduating with honors from the Birmingham School of Law, Chairman Rogers spent his time before Congress as a practicing attorney and a small business owner in Calhoun County, Alabama. Please welcome to Mark Alford's America, Chairman Mike Rogers. Chairman, good to have you here.
Glad to be here. Every time I hear the word Alabama, I want to say Roll Tide.
I've heard that several times in committee hearings.
That's right.
It kind of shakes some people
up.
up.
It's kind of an automatic knee-jerk reaction when you hear that word.
What kind of business were you in?
I have commercial real estate. That was the main thing. And then I also own 50% interest in a car dealership.
Really?
I didn't work there. My best friend
Yeah.
was in the car business. I was just an investor.
Is there a car dealers caucus here in Congress? Because we have several. Chairman Roger Williams.
Well, I'm former. I sold
yeah, I know
my
you're
interest.
former, but
I don't think there's a caucus, but
Yeah.
we've got Mike Kelly and Roger Williams, both are and then also
And Vern.
Vern Buchanan. All three are very big, and Vern in particular had I think a couple of dozen dealerships at one time. But if you weren't here, but when we had the tax reform, major tax reform legislation about 3 cycles ago, they were very heavily involved in shaping that to make sure it didn't hurt the auto industry, because the initial version would have been pretty destructive. So it's just a reminder that in our body, we've got a lot of people whose backgrounds bring incredible expertise to this institution that manifests itself when we go into different things. Some deal with broadcasting, some deal with energy production, some deal with tax law, telecommunications, whatever. We've got a real wealth and breadth of personal knowledge that's outside this institution that really kind of makes it work.
I think that's one of the beauties about it that I've learned in my 6 months here is how much we talk a lot about diversity. Man, we've got diversity. When you talk about the backgrounds of experiences and what people can bring to the table and the different ideas, when we were marking up the NDAA and we're hearing all these different ideas from people from both sides of the aisle, I tell you what, that was one of the best experiences I've been in so far, to be in that till almost 1 a.m. talking about how we're going to fund our military, the importance of removing a lot of the woke indoctrination in our military programs.
And that didn't get a lot of attention, really. When the floor debate happened, we did a lot in that bill.
Took a meat cleaver to it.
Exactly. And it was kind of overshadowed by the later debate on the floor over abortion travel and transgender funding. But we really ripped it right out of the roots in the committee and got a bipartisan vote still after doing that. So very proud of that. But also, I'm glad to hear you say that, because you're one of the members who actually gets to make law. There's not many people to get their authorization bills passed in this place. The Armed Services Committee gets it passed every year and has for 62 consecutive years and makes law with that legislation. It's going to happen again this year. So all those hours you spent in there and in the hearings for 6 months prior to that were not thrown away. You're making law with that bill, and that makes this a lot more rewarding. I don't know how some of these members who are on committees that haven't passed an authorization bill in 20 years keep getting up in the morning and coming in, because it's got to be just exasperating.
How did that woke language get into the previous NDAAs? How did it come about where our military was more concerned about diversity, equity, inclusion, CRT, these woke ideologies, than raising an Army, a Navy, Marine Corps, a military branch full of patriotic Americans who are not looking at the color of someone's skin, but really the content of their character as a human being?
That's a great question, and most people don't realize that was a really recent phenomenon, and I mean very recent. It came in with Biden and the what I call the suits at the Pentagon, the political appointees, the Secretary of Defense, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and so down the food chain, the political appointees. It wasn't the uniforms that did this, and our legislation that we've passed, the NDAA each year, has always been silent on these things, and that's because we were not worried about using the department as a social petri dish for experimentation. But a little bit of it started with Obama, but not bad. I mean, it was a little, at that time, it was discussion about whether gays members had to continue the Clinton philosophy of don't ask, don't tell.
Right.
You could be gay, just don't talk about it. Well, under Obama, everybody could go ahead and talk about it, and we had to deal with some housing issues and stuff like that, promotions, but that was it. And then when Biden came in, he sold his soul to the left to get the nomination, to get Bernie Sanders and Pocahontas to support him, and those people, their staff are who's running the White House and setting policy. That's why they're so happy with him. They didn't want to run against him.
He's basically a Trojan horse.
Exactly. He's
loaded
an
up with
empty
all
vessel.
that progressive woke ideology.
That's exactly. He's an empty vessel that
Marionette.
the far left fills with their policies, and that's when all this stuff came in. They put the Secretary of Defense in there, who has been a disappointment because he's gone along with this stuff, and it's been in the last 2.5 years that we've seen this infiltration of all this woke social policy, and it's going to leave with the Biden administration. We take the White House. I mean, first of all, we're going to get a lot of it out with this legislation.
Right.
But what remains, it's all going to leave when Biden leaves, and that's going to be in another 16 months or thereabouts.
I hope we can make it that
I do
long.
want your listeners to know that did not come from this legislative body. That all came from political appointees to the Biden administration. And it's a reminder to people how powerful the presidency is. It permeates all sorts of parts of our lives that are not legislated. It's policy driven by people. And I've gone out of my way to urge the personnel subcommittee to go after the suits and not the uniforms, because as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs has told me, I have one question to ask when they get to give me a policy. Is this legal? If it's legal, I have to salute and say, yes, sir. But I can tell you from many private conversations with service chiefs, combatant commanders, and other general officers, they are not happy.
Well, that's what I was wondering. When we talk with these generals, and we had a military personnel subcommittee hearing with the superintendents of each academy, and here they are promoting the race-based inclusion for admissions, and even after the Supreme Court decision, I know the Supreme Court decision there was a carve-out for military academies, but will the generals' tunes change when they come before us when we have a strong Republican president? All this stuff that they're saying to try to include this diversity, equity, inclusion, taking up for these programs, will their tune change then?
Absolutely. Their job is, as I was
So
told
they don't
by
believe what they're saying?
No, their job is to implement the policies of the department. So, again, my point is, if the Secretary of Defense, and more often it's the Deputy Secretary, she's more involved in the day-to-day policy development and implementation. If they establish the policy, if it's legal, general officers have to work to enforce it. Keep in mind, these people have spent their careers being taught the chain of command, salute, and say, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, if it's a legal order. And that's what they're doing. They're doing their job. But I'm just telling you, when you talk to them privately, off the record, they're not at all happy about this. For example, the abortion travel policy.
Right.
Many of these officers are strong pro-life in their religious convictions, but that's not what they're sworn to do. They're sworn to defend and protect this country and the Constitution. And if they're given a lawful order, they have to try to implement that order. And that's what they're doing. So I've been very defensive about these general officers getting blamed for this, because I've been doing this so long, and they've never promoted this kind of stuff. It all came when Biden came in, and these liberal appointees he's put in the department set these policies, and these general officers have to salute and say yes, sir, because it's lawful. It's just wrong-headed.
Stay with us. We continue our conversation with Chairman Mike Rogers in Mark Alford's America when we come back. Welcome back to Mark Alford's America, where we give you a behind-the-scenes look at Washington, let you know a little bit about what's going on here, meet some of the great people helping shape our nation. Mike Rogers is the congressman from Alabama's 3rd Congressional District, also the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, on which I'm honored to be a part of. And Mike, thank you for being with us. Let's talk about communist China. I tell you what, when I got here, I think my first week, we had a skiff, secret session with some generals, and they were talking about China, and my jaw almost dropped when I heard the facts about what's going on. How big of a threat is communist China to America?
It is our number one existential concern, and it is a global problem. Most folks don't think about it. I mean, the truth is most folks didn't think about national security that much until Russia invaded Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a very sobering effect on everybody in our country and around the world, because that was the first time in 75 years that a sovereign nation was invaded by another nation over territory. We thought the world order was set, and that's been demonstrated to not necessarily be the case. So it is very important that the United States never walk away from Ukraine, because if Russia were to be successful at taking land from a sovereign nation, it would give the green light to President Xi and China to do whatever they want to. Not just in Taiwan. That is the thing that has our primary attention, because not just Taiwan's production of chips, but the international shipping lanes through there, they would have control over that. That we can never let that happen. So we have, and even President Biden in his lucid moments, when he's been asked, has said, we would come to Taiwan's defense because we don't really have a choice. But people need to understand what they're doing is global in their reach, not just economic, but militarily. This Belt and Road initiative they've got, they're building infrastructure around the planet, both economic and military, to have global reach. Right now, we are the only global superpower. And there's a huge economic or military infrastructure that's been built up over decades. They're trying to do the exact same thing with their Belt and Road initiative, and we have to be serious about it. And we have to recognize that we've been fighting a terrestrial war, or really 2 terrestrial wars, for the last 20 years. Now we're pivoting to the Pacific, which is a whole different kettle of fish. And the way we fight that, you don't fight in the sea with tanks. We got to do a whole lot with our Navy. We got to do a whole lot with our missile defense, our space capabilities. It's a different fight, and against a much more serious and capable adversary, and which is why I'm concerned right now about the appropriations process. Our NDAA is structured primarily with taking on China, getting ready for that fight that could happen in the Indo-Pacific. And I just led a CODEL over there. Now, we have all kind of challenges in Guam, in the Philippines, and Japan, and as far as infrastructure, and not to mention Taiwan. We've got to get to getting, as they say, on this problem. If the appropriations bills aren't passed and we don't have the funding to implement our NDAA, it's going to really send a terrible signal, from our perspective, to China, that we aren't taking this threat serious.
Xi Jinping is a bully.
He is a bully.
Bullies thrive off weakness. President Biden is a weak president.
That's exactly right.
How important is it that we get a strong president in there as soon as possible who can set things straight and be a deterrent, along with our abilities through what we do in Congress to properly fund the military?
Yeah, that's a great question. It would be everything. It would be a game changer. The fact is, Putin went into Ukraine when he saw the way our president withdrew from Afghanistan.
Right.
Just what a disaster. But it gave him the green light. And I hearken back to 2014 when Putin took Crimea from Ukraine. Nothing happened. Obama did nothing, sanctioned a few oligarchs, and that's it. He said afterwards he was stunned that nobody cared when he invaded a sovereign nation that took territory. So when he saw another part of the Obama administration, Joe Biden, react similarly in Afghanistan, it gave him the green light. That's why I said a little while ago, we cannot walk away from Ukraine, because that then tells President Xi, you bully, you can have whatever you want to because we'll fold. But if we have a strong president, that will change everything. That lets him know we're not going to be pushed around, and we need that. We have a very weak vassal right now.
Part of the deterrence against communist China is our nuclear triad, which includes the B-2 stealth bomber housed at Whiteman Air Force Base. You've been there. You know what a great asset that's been for decades now. Coming online is the B-21. I was honored to go out to Palmdale to see it, to actually touch this unbelievable machine. Talk a little bit about that, what you can in this setting, about the deterrent factor that the B-21 is going to be soon, hopefully to be housed at Whiteman as well.
Well, I will tell you this: when I saw the B-21 in the news, I could not believe they put it on the news because that is an incredible weapon, and we've kept it very secret what it's capable of. I was able to find out later that the angles they used did not illustrate some of the capabilities, but that's an awesome machine. But I do want to go back to your initial comment. The Triad is the main deterrent for anybody to come after us. And that's why we're going through this incredibly expensive process of modernizing it with things like the B-21.
And real quick, for those who don't know, explain the Triad.
Well, it's the ICBMs, which intercontinental ballistic missiles, and then you've got the bombers, what you just described, and the B-52s, which deliver, and then we've got the sea capabilities. So that's the Triad, the three things we have.
And those work in concert.
They all working, and that's the whole point, is we want redundancy. So let's say you could take out our Triad, our ICBMs, which are in the northern part of America, Wyoming, North Dakota, that area. If you could take them out, you still can't get the submarines, which are underwater. And we've got the bombers, the long-range bombers. So we want all three so an adversary can't get them all. There has been some effort in earlier years to get rid of one leg of the Triad. It's always been fought off. And I will say this, in my time, we've had 2 secretaries of defense that came in wanting to get rid of the bomber leg. And by the time they've been in office 6 months, every one of them changed their mind.
Because they get to know what's really going on.
You need all three. Yeah. You've got to have all three.
Are we ready for a conflict with Communist China as an American people?
No, but I don't want your listeners to confuse that with losing. If we went to war with China over Taiwan right now, we would win. It would be brutally ugly, and the casualties would be catastrophic. The losses we had over 20 years in the Middle East we would do that in a day. And not just in Taiwan alone.
So what do we need to do to get ready as an American people?
Everybody keeps using this term, and it's accurate. We need to turn Taiwan into a military porcupine. First of all, it's hard to take Taiwan just geographically when you see where China has to land and try to get through that terrain. It's tough. But we need more capability in the region with our partners like Japan, like South Korea, like the Philippines, Guam, and in our naval infrastructure to make it clear to them you won't win, and the casualties are going to be mass on you. See, that's the main thing I want people to understand. Z is not only a bully, but he sees himself in history. And the idea of him trying to take on the United States and losing is something I don't think he would ever do. So we have to make sure he understands you will lose, and it will be in a brutal way. Right now, we would win, but it would be a tough fight, and it wouldn't be something that humiliated him in history.
Chairman, I wish we had more time. I could sit here for an hour with you. We got to go vote, I think.
That's right.
But I really appreciate your leadership,
Thank you.
Your friendship, and what you're doing for America. It is so important. Thank you, sir.
Glad to be with you.
Hey, thanks, everyone, for joining us for Mark Alford's America each and every week. It's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to serve the 4th Congressional District, to be your voice and your vote. We'll talk again next week. And until then, take care, God bless. And remember, I believe in you, and I believe in America.